Your opinions are useless, sweetheart. My wife sneered when she became the new manager as she fired me. After my useless role cost them 10 top accounts and $180 million, the CEO ordered me back, threatening to sue based on my employment contract if I refused. In the emergency meeting, I just pointed to one small line. Our lawyer read the clause carefully, my wife's eyes widening. She looked straight at the CEO as the room fell silent as she began to shake, whispering, "Oh my God." Tuesday morning, 9:12 a.m., and I'm sitting in my gray fabric prison, otherwise known as Cubicle 47B, when my world decides to implode with the precision of a well-executed hostile takeover. I've got 3 renewal contracts spread across my desk like tarot cards predicting a shitty future, my coffee's gone cold, and the fluorescent lights are humming their usual tune of corporate despair. That's when she arrives. Raina Mercer, my wife, my newly minted manager. My personal Brutus in a Tom Ford jacket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She leans against the fabric wall of my cubicle with the casual confidence of someone who's never had to worry about their 401k matching contributions, and I can smell her perfume, something French and expensive that screams, I make decisions that ruin lives before lunch. The jacket she's wearing is sharp enough to perform open-heart surgery, and knowing Raina, she'd probably volunteer for the job. Your opinions are useless, sweetheart, she whispers, and I swear the temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. It's delivered with the kind of surgical precision that would make a litigation attorney weep with envy. Then she hands me a termination letter. Not just any termination letter. This baby's got more signatures than a series of funding round. HR stamp from Greta Lynn, countersigned by compliance, and probably blessed by every C-suite executive who's ever worried about their stock options. It's a masterpiece of corporate bureaucracy, the kind of document that would make a law school professor use it as a case study in how to destroy someone's life in triplicate. The office goes quiet. Not dead quiet. That would be merciful. No, this is the kind of uncomfortable silence that happens when everyone pretends they're not watching a public execution while secretly taking mental notes for their own survival. People glance up from their keyboards with the morbid curiosity of rubberneckers at a Tesla crash, then immediately look back down like they're suddenly fascinated by quarterly compliance reports. My security badge, that little plastic rectangle that's been my ticket to this corporate wonderland for the past 8 years, dies mid-email. 1 second I'm reviewing a contract modification for Blue Ridge Insurance. The next second, I'm digitally persona non grata. The screen flickers once, like it's giving me a little electronic farewell wave, then goes black. I look around the office, taking in the legal tech marketing posters plastered on every available wall surface. AI plus machine learning for client success. They proclaim in fonts designed to make shareholders feel warm and fuzzy about their portfolio diversification. Revolutionizing legal services through innovation. Right. The only thing getting revolutionized here is my employment status. There's something almost poetic about those posters now. All that talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, when what they really needed was some basic human intelligence and maybe a crash course in how not to fuck over your best relationship manager. But hey, what do I know? According to my wife, my opinions are useless. I start packing my desk, and it's amazing how 8 years of corporate life can fit into a cardboard box that probably cost the company 12 cents to manufacture. My coffee mug with the faded law school logo, a few family photos from back when Raina and I actually liked each other, some stress balls that clearly didn't work, and my lucky pen, the one I used to sign the Atlas Protocol licensing agreement that's about to become very, very relevant. But the most important thing going into that box isn't visible to the vultures circling my cubicle. It's my leather folio, the one I've carried to every client meeting, every board presentation, every late-night strategy session where we turned legal tech buzzwords into actual revenue. Inside that folio is something they probably forgot exists when they were planning this little corporate coup, the Atlas Protocol. See, here's where it gets interesting. The Atlas Protocol isn't just some methodology I developed while collecting a salary and benefits. It's a comprehensive client success playbook that I wrote, refined, and licensed to the company as a separate SaaS solution. Think of it as a legal tech startup living inside a legacy firm, complete with its own intellectual property protections and licensing agreements that would make a venture capital attorney get a little misty-eyed. The beautiful thing about intellectual property law is that it doesn't give a damn about office politics or who's sleeping with whom. When you create something, license it properly, and maintain the documentation trail, you own it. Period. End of story. Roll credits. Maya Ortiz at reception sees me walking past with my box of corporate memories, and she reaches out to squeeze my forearm. It's the kind of gesture that says, I'm a witness to this injustice, and I'll remember. Maya's good people. The kind who actually reads the employee handbook and knows the difference between wrongful termination and justified corporate restructuring. Deshawn Reed at security gives me a single nod as I head for the exit. Deshawn's been here longer than anyone, seen more executives come and go than a revolving door at a private equity firm. His nod isn't sympathy, it's respect. The kind you give to someone who's about to walk out with dignity intact, even if they don't know it yet. The elevator ride down feels longer than the due diligence process on a hostile takeover. 47 floors of corporate real estate, each one representing another layer of bureaucracy that somehow thought it was a good idea to terminate the guy who managed relationships worth $180 million in annual recurring revenue. But hey, I'm sure their AI and machine learning algorithms will handle those client relationships just fine. Because nothing says personalized legal service like a chatbot. I drive my Tesla Model S back to the Upper West Side penthouse that I definitely overpaid for during last year's bull market euphoria. The car's autopilot is probably more competent than half the management team I just left behind, and at least it doesn't try to micromanage my driving decisions or question my methods when I successfully navigate traffic without causing a 7-car pileup. The penthouse feels different now, less like a symbol of success, more like a really expensive waiting room. I pour myself 3 fingers of Macallan 25, the kind of scotch that costs more per ounce than most people make in an hour, and set up my whiteboard in the home office. I start circling dates, mapping out timelines, and thinking about contract clauses that corporate attorneys probably skimmed over when they were rushing to finalize my termination. That's when I text Elliot Park in Ops, start watching the renewal calendar. Elliot's one of those IT guys who actually understands that information is power, and he's got access to more system logs than the NSA. His reply comes back in less than 30 seconds. Copy. Buckle up. 2 words that tell me everything I need to know. Elliot sees what I see, that this termination wasn't just stupid, it was strategically catastrophic. They just fired the guy who wrote the playbook, managed the relationships, and held the keys to intellectual property that generates more revenue than some Fortune 500 companies. I sit back in my leather chair, sip the Macallan, and smile for the first time since 9/12 this morning. Because while they were busy congratulating themselves on their corporate power play, they forgot to read the fine print. And in the legal world, the fine print isn't just important, it's everything. Tomorrow, I start making some calls. Tonight, I'm going to enjoy this whiskey and think about how sweet it's going to be when they realize that the guy with the useless opinions might just own their entire business model. Game on, sweetheart. Wednesday morning finds me at my kitchen island, which has been temporarily transformed into a war room that would make any big law litigation team weep with envy. I've got papers spread out like trial exhibits, each document positioned with the strategic precision of a chess grandmaster planning a checkmate in 12 moves. My Italian marble countertop, another brilliant investment decision from my bull market days, now serves as the foundation for what's about to become the most expensive legal education my former employer never wanted to receive. The centerpiece of this paper battlefield is my employment agreement, a 47-page document that most people would use as a sleep aid, but which I'm reading like it's the fucking Rosetta Stone of corporate revenge. I flipped to Section 14C, a clause that was probably drafted by some junior associate who was billing hours at 2 a.m. and thinking about their law school debt, instead of the catastrophic loophole they were about to create. Here's the beautiful thing about contract law. It doesn't care about your feelings, your office politics, or whether your wife thinks your opinions are useless. It cares about what's written down, signed, and legally binding. And what's written down in Section 14C is a masterpiece of unintended consequences that would make a venture capital attorney shed a single tear of joy. The clause is elegantly simple. It voids my non-compete agreement for employee-originated relationships if I'm terminated without cause. Not terminated for cause, without cause. Big fucking difference. Terminating someone for cause requires documentation, performance improvement plans, HR investigations, and a paper trail thicker than a private equity fund's due diligence report. Terminating someone without cause? That's what happens when your new manager wife decides your opinions are useless and wants to flex her corporate muscles. But wait, there's more. Because the lawyers who drafted this contract were apparently feeling generous that day, they included a little provision that turns this from a simple non-compete waiver into a financial nuclear weapon. Any attempt to compel performance after a without cause termination triggers liquidated damages. Not just any damages. Liquidated damages pegged to trailing 12-month revenue from the affected relationships. I pull out my calculator, the same one I used in business school when I was naive enough to think corporate America operated on merit instead of who you're sleeping with, and start running numbers. The figure that emerges is the kind of number that makes CFOs wake up in cold sweats and immediately update their LinkedIn profiles. Exhibit J is where things get really interesting. It's attached to my employment agreement like a perfectly timed acquisition clause, listing every single client relationship that I originated and nurtured over the past 8 years. These aren't just names on a list. They're revenue streams, portfolio companies, and business relationships that I built from the ground up while everyone else was in meetings talking about synergies and paradigm shifts. Whitmore Capital, $24 million in annual revenue, originated when I cold called their managing partner during a particularly brutal January in 2019. Kestrel Logistics, $18 million annually, landed after 6 months of relationship building that involved more dinners than a Series A roadshow. Novartis Biotech, $16 million per year, secured right after their IPO when everyone else was chasing the flashier tech startups. The list continues like a greatest hits album of business development. Helios Minerals, Blue Ridge Insurance, Orison Retail Group, Vantage Energy, Redwood Health, Arclight Media, Sterling Foods. 10 accounts that I didn't just manage. I created, cultivated, and turned into the kind of sticky, recurring revenue that private equity firms masturbate to in their quarterly board meetings. Here's the kicker. Each master services agreement contains a key person clause naming me specifically. Not the company, not the department, not some AI-powered relationship management system, me. These clauses exist because sophisticated clients understand that in the legal services world, relationships matter more than corporate branding. They're not paying for our fancy offices or our machine learning buzzwords. They're paying for expertise, trust, and the kind of personalized service that can't be algorithmically replicated. But the real treasure in this document treasure hunt isn't even in the employment agreement. It's sitting in a separate folder marked Atlas Protocol Licensing, and it's about to become my former employer's worst nightmare. See, the Atlas Protocol wasn't just some internal methodology I developed while collecting a salary and complaining about the coffee in the break room. It was a comprehensive, systematized approach to client success that I created, refined, documented, and then, here's the genius part, licensed to the company as an independent intellectual property asset. Think of it as a legal tech startup living inside a legacy firm. The Atlas Protocol includes everything. Client onboarding scripts that convert prospects at a 73% rate, renewal cadence templates that have reduced churn by 41%, dashboard configurations that predict client satisfaction with scary accuracy, and escalation procedures that have prevented more contract terminations than a hostage negotiator. I structured the Atlas license as an annual agreement, renewable at my discretion, with usage fees tied to the number of client accounts utilizing the methodology. It was a brilliant hedge against exactly the kind of corporate fuckery I'm currently experiencing, a way to monetize my intellectual property independently of my employment status. The licensing agreement terminated automatically the day they fired me. Not next month, not after a transition period, not when it's convenient for their quarterly earnings call. The day they handed me that termination letter signed by HR and blessed by compliance. Every Atlas email template they're using, unauthorized. Every dashboard configuration pulling my methodology, infringement. Every client interaction following my documented processes, willful violation of intellectual property rights with statutory damages that start at $750 per work and can go up to $150,000 for willful infringement. I text Elliot again. Watch for any transition to team model communications. His response is immediate, a skull emoji followed by, they sent out the Atlas Q4 renewal templates to 17 accounts this morning. Timestamps in the system logs. 17 accounts. Using my intellectual property. After my license terminated. In legal terms, this is what we call willful infringement. And it's the kind of mistake that transforms a simple employment dispute into a federal court bonanza that could fund a small country's legal system. I lean back in my chair and pour another finger of the Macallan, watching the Manhattan skyline through my floor-to-ceiling windows. Somewhere across this city, in a conference room that probably cost more to furnish than most people's houses, my former colleagues are having meetings about client retention and revenue optimization, blissfully unaware that they're committing intellectual property violations in real time. The beauty of well-drafted contracts is that they don't care about intentions or excuses. They care about performance, compliance, and the legal consequences of fucking around and finding out. And my former employer is about to get a masterclass in all three. Tomorrow, I start making calls. Tonight, I'm going to read every single clause in these agreements one more time, because in the legal world, victory belongs to whoever actually reads the fine print. And I've always been very good at reading. Thursday morning, 10:47 a.m., and my phone rings with the kind of urgency that usually accompanies hostile takeover announcements or SEC investigations. It's Elliot, and he sounds like a day trader watching his portfolio collapse in real time. You need to hear this, he says without preamble. Raina just finished running a client retention webinar. Called it Transitioning to Excellence, our AI-assisted team approach. I can practically hear him making air quotes through the phone. It was a fucking disaster of biblical proportions. I'm sitting in my home office, still in my bathrobe, sipping coffee that costs more per pound than most people's car payments. And suddenly I'm more awake than I've been since law school finals. Tell me everything. She had PowerPoint slides about synergistic pod methodologies and machine learning enhanced client experiences. Elliot continues, his voice carrying the tone of someone describing a particularly gruesome accident scene. 43 minutes of corporate buzzword bingo that would make a venture capital pitch deck look like Shakespeare. The beautiful thing about working in legal tech for 8 years is that you develop a sixth sense for when client relationships are about to implode. It's like being a sommelier for corporate disaster. You can taste the impending doom in the air, detect the subtle notes of executive panic, and predict exactly when the shit is going to hit the fan with scary accuracy. 10 minutes in, Elliot says, and Whitmore Capital types in the chat. Where is my actual account manager? Whitmore Capital. 24 million in annual recurring revenue, managed by a private equity firm that didn't become worth $2.3 billion by accepting corporate doublespeak and algorithmic hand-waving. These are people who acquired 17 companies last year and can smell bullshit from 3 time zones away. What did she tell them? She explained the new pod system, Elliot says, and I swear I can hear him physically cringing through the phone. Said they'd have access to a dynamic team of specialists supported by cutting-edge AI tools for enhanced service delivery. Direct quote from the transcript. I set down my coffee cup with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. Please tell me you recorded this. Every painful second. But here's where it gets good. Whitmore's representative asked to speak to their designated pod leader. Raina had to admit they hadn't actually assigned anyone yet because they were optimizing resource allocation across client portfolios. Translation: they fired the guy who managed the relationships and hadn't bothered to figure out who was going to do the actual work. It's like announcing a hostile takeover before you've secured financing, or launching a startup before you've written a single line of code. How long did Whitmore stay on the call? 37 seconds after that admission. Elliot says with the satisfied tone of someone watching karmic justice unfold in real time. They said, and I'm reading directly from the chat log, we'll be reviewing our master services agreement and exercising appropriate contract provisions. This call is concluded. I pull out my copy of the Whitmore agreement, flipping to the key person clause I negotiated 3 years ago during their Series C funding round. It's a thing of beauty, really, a perfectly crafted escape hatch that allows them to terminate with 30 days' notice if their designated relationship manager is no longer available. The clause was Whitmore's idea, actually, Because they understood something that my former employer apparently doesn't. In professional services, relationships aren't transferable assets like office furniture or software licenses. That's not the end of it. Elliot continues. By 2:47 p.m., Whitmore's legal counsel sent a formal termination notice citing the key person provision. Clean, professional, and absolutely devastating to quarterly projections. $24 million gone. Just like that. Poof. Vanished faster than employee morale at a mandatory company culture seminar. Friday morning, Kestrel Logistics follows suit. Elliot says, his voice carrying the monotone delivery of someone reading financial obituaries. $18 million annually, terminated under identical circumstances. Their COO sent a 2-sentence email. Key person clause invoked. Contract terminated effective immediately. I leaned back in my chair, watching the Hudson River through my penthouse windows and thinking about the beautiful simplicity of well-drafted contract provisions. These clauses exist for exactly this scenario. When companies make strategic decisions that are so monumentally stupid they qualify as breaches of fiduciary duty. By Sunday, Elliot continues, Novartis Biotech instructed their outside counsel to begin unwinding procedures. These guys just closed a Series B for $87 million, and they're not about to let some corporate restructuring experiment jeopardize their legal compliance requirements. Novartis, $16 million in annual revenue, managed through the most complex regulatory environment this side of nuclear waste disposal. They're the kind of client that needs someone who understands the difference between FDA guidance documents and statutory requirements, who can navigate biotech patent law while managing SEC disclosure obligations, and who won't try to replace institutional knowledge with machine learning algorithms and positive thinking. My phone's been lighting up like a Christmas tree, I tell Elliot. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, probably half the C-suite trying to figure out how this happened. You taking the calls? Fuck no. Let them leave voicemails. Let them explain to their board of directors how they managed to lose $48 million in annual revenue in 72 hours because they thought AI could replace human relationships. The thing about trust in professional services is that it's not an algorithm. You can't machine learn your way into understanding that Whitmore's managing partner has a pathological fear of regulatory changes, or that Kestrel's CFO needs detailed explanations for every billing variance because he came up through audit and thinks like a forensic accountant, or that Novartis's general counsel speaks in FDA regulation citations when she's stressed. These are human insights, developed through years of relationship building, late-night phone calls, and the kind of personalized attention that can't be systematized into a SaaS platform. When a client calls at 3:04 a.m. because they're facing a potential compliance crisis, they don't want to talk to a chatbot or a dynamic team of specialists. They want to talk to the person who knows their business, understands their risks, and has successfully guided them through similar challenges before. There's something else, Elliot says, his voice dropping to the conspiratorial whisper of someone about to reveal state secrets. I've been monitoring system access logs. They're still using Atlas email templates on 17 other accounts. I smile for the first time in this conversation. Screenshot everything. Timestamps, user IDs, the works. Already done. Saved to an encrypted drive that definitely doesn't exist in our corporate system. This is why I like Elliot. He understands that in corporate warfare, information is ammunition, and documentation is the difference between winning and getting buried in legal fees. How bad is the panic level in the office? Scale of 1 to 10? I'd say we're at emergency board meeting level panic. Priya's been in her office since 6 a.m. running damage control models. Harper's buried in contract reviews, and Raina looks like she's been mainlining espresso and regret. Perfect. Let them panic. Let them run their models and review their contracts and realize that their brilliant restructuring plan just became the most expensive mistake in company history. Because while they're busy having emergency meetings about artificial intelligence and pod methodologies, I'm sitting here with my coffee and my contracts, watching their client portfolio hemorrhage like a venture capital fund during a market correction. And this is just the beginning. By midweek, I'm watching the corporate equivalent of a controlled demolition, except nobody's in control and the demolition is happening in real time during market hours. It's like watching a private equity portfolio company collapse, but with more entertainment value and significantly better scotch to accompany the show. Wednesday morning, 8:23 a.m., and Elliot sends me a text that reads like a casualty report from a particularly brutal merger war. Helios Minerals just terminated. Legal notice came in at 7:47 a.m. Helios Minerals, $14 million in annual recurring revenue, owned by Blackstone Capital Partners, managed by people who didn't become worth $7 billion by tolerating corporate incompetence or algorithmic fairy tales. These are the kind of private equity professionals who can calculate IRR in their sleep and smell a dying portfolio company from 3 conference calls away. I pour my morning coffee, Blue Mountain Jamaican that costs more per ounce than most people's hourly wage, and pull up the Helios contract on my tablet. Their termination clause is a masterpiece of legal precision. 30 days notice for material breach of service standards, including but not limited to failure to maintain designated key personnel relationships as specified in Exhibit C. Exhibit C. The attachment I negotiated 2 years ago that specifically names me as the primary relationship manager and requires written client consent for any substitutions. It's the kind of clause that corporate attorneys skim over during contract reviews because they're too busy thinking about billable hours and partnership tracks to consider the strategic implications of relationship-dependent revenue streams. Thursday brings Elliot's next update, delivered with the clinical precision of a pathologist describing cause of death. Blue Ridge Insurance invoked termination this morning, citing key person provisions and requesting immediate fee waivers for services not yet rendered. Blue Ridge Insurance, $13 million annually, managed by a regional carrier that survived 3 industry consolidations and 2 regulatory overhauls by being absolutely ruthless about vendor performance. They're not the kind of client that gets excited about AI-powered legal services or dynamic pod methodologies. They want results, documentation, and the same relationship manager who's been handling their compliance requirements since the Obama administration. The fee waiver request is particularly brutal. It's essentially Blue Ridge saying, not only are we leaving, but we want our money back for the services you can't actually provide. It's like getting divorced and then having your ex-wife send you a bill for the time she wasted being married to you. Friday morning, Orison Retail Group drops their termination notice with all the ceremony of a Supreme Court decision. $12 million in annual revenue gone. Their general counsel's email is 2 sentences of legal brutality. Contract terminated effective immediately pursuant to Section 7.3. Transition of all files and documentation expected within 48 hours. Section 7.3. I remember negotiating that clause during their acquisition by Apollo Global Management. It allows immediate termination if the service provider undergoes material organizational changes that affect service delivery capabilities. Firing the primary relationship manager and replacing him with an AI-powered pod system definitely qualifies as a material organizational change. By weekend, the dominoes are falling with the synchronized precision of a hostile takeover timeline. Saturday brings news that Vantage Energy has sent termination notice through their outside counsel, Morrison and Forster, which means they're not fucking around. $15 million annually, managed by an energy company that's navigated 3 commodity cycles and 2 federal regulatory changes by being absolutely paranoid about vendor stability. When energy companies start hiring big law firms to terminate vendor relationships, you know the situation has moved from corporate restructuring challenge to board-level crisis requiring immediate damage control and probably some new job postings on LinkedIn. Sunday morning, I'm reading the Wall Street Journal on my terrace. Because nothing pairs with corporate disaster coverage like Manhattan skyline views and artisanal coffee, when Elliot sends a group text that reads like a portfolio manager's nightmare. Redwood Health defected to Kirkland & Ellis. Arclight Media signed LOI with competitor. Sterling Foods asking for your personal number. When denied, immediate termination notice. Redwood Health, $11 million annually. Arclight Media, $9 million. Sterling Foods, $8 million. 3 more clients who decided that whatever my former employer was offering in terms of AI-enhanced service delivery wasn't worth the risk of disrupting established relationships during their own growth phases. The Sterling Foods situation is particularly telling. They specifically asked for my personal contact information, which suggests they understand exactly what happened and want to continue the relationship outside the corporate structure, when they were told that wasn't possible. Probably by some HR representative reading from a script about appropriate professional boundaries, they terminated immediately. It's like watching a venture capital portfolio company discover that their star engineer just left to start a competing firm, except instead of losing technical talent, they're losing the relationships that generate actual revenue. I do the math on my calculator, the same one I used to calculate my original Atlas Protocol licensing fees when I was naive enough to think corporate loyalty was a two-way street. 10 accounts gone. $180 million in annual recurring revenue, evaporated faster than employee stock options during a market correction. $180 million. That's not just a number. That's the kind of revenue loss that triggers emergency board meetings, SEC filings, shareholder lawsuits, and the kind of executive turnover that makes the business press start using words like crisis and restructuring and potential acquisition target. The beautiful thing about well-documented client relationships is that their value becomes very, very clear when they disappear. When I was sitting in my cubicle managing these accounts, they were just line items in a quarterly report. Now that they're gone, they represent an existential threat to the company's valuation, market position, and ability to service its debt obligations. Monday morning brings confirmation that the panic has reached the 38th floor, where the executive suite resides in climate-controlled comfort and strategic denial. Elliot's text reads like a scene from a corporate thriller. Emergency board meeting called. Agenda Item 1, Revenue Shortfall and Client Retention Crisis. Harper's been in conference room A since 6 a.m. with 3 outside counsel attorneys. The fact that they've brought in outside counsel tells me everything I need to know about their legal exposure assessment. When companies hire external law firms to handle internal crises, it means their general counsel has advised them that the situation is too complex, too risky, or too potentially catastrophic for in-house legal to manage alone. Pre is running worst-case scenarios. Elliot continues. I heard restructuring mentioned 17 times in an hour-long meeting. Also heard hostile takeover risk and activist investor interest. Restructuring, the corporate equivalent of chemotherapy, sometimes necessary, always painful, frequently unsuccessful. And the fact that they're discussing hostile takeover risk means someone's run the numbers and realized that losing $180 million in annual revenue makes them vulnerable to acquisition by competitors who understand the value of relationship-based business models. Tuesday brings rumors that Aldrich Capital, no relation to our CEO Richard Aldrich, but wouldn't that be fucking poetic, has been asking questions about our client retention rates and revenue stability. In private equity terms, that's like a shark circling a wounded swimmer while calculating the protein content. PR's drafting crisis communications, Elliott reports. Something about temporary market adjustments and strategic positioning for future growth opportunities. Basically corporate speak for we fucked up catastrophically and hope everyone forgets by next quarter. But the market doesn't forget $180 million revenue gaps. Shareholders don't forget when growth companies suddenly become contraction companies. And clients definitely don't forget when their trusted advisors get replaced by artificial intelligence and corporate restructuring initiatives. I finish my coffee, check my stock portfolio, properly diversified, thankfully, unlike my former employer's client base, and book an appointment with my barber. Tomorrow, I'm going to put on my best Tom Ford suit, the navy one that makes me look like someone who understands the difference between confidence and desperation, and wait for the phone to ring. Because when companies lose $180 million in revenue in less than a week, desperate phone calls from the C-suite aren't predictions, they're mathematical certainties. Monday morning, 7:41 a.m., and my phone rings with the unmistakable urgency of a CEO who's just watched his quarterly projections evaporate faster than venture capital funding during a recession. I'm sitting in my home office, wearing a cashmere robe that costs more than most people's monthly rent, sipping coffee that's probably worth more per ounce than crude oil, when Richard Aldridge's name appears on my caller ID. I let it ring 3 times. Not because I'm busy, I've got nowhere to be and nothing but time, but because in corporate negotiations, desperation has a sound, and I want to hear exactly how desperate he is before I say a single word. We need to talk, he says without preamble. his voice carrying the strained quality of someone who's been awake since 4 a.m. running damage control scenarios and calculating exactly how fucked his company really is. "Good morning to you too, Richard," I say, setting down my coffee with the casual precision of someone who holds all the cards and knows it. "Lovely weather we're having. How's the client retention business treating you these days?" The silence that follows is the kind you hear in boardrooms right before someone announces a hostile takeover or a federal investigation. It's the sound of a man realizing that his brilliant corporate restructuring plan has turned into the business equivalent of the Hindenburg disaster, except with more SEC filings and fewer insurance claims. "Your employment contract permits specific performance," he says, and I can practically hear him reading from notes prepared by Harper Quinn and probably 3 outside counsel attorneys who bill more per hour than most people make in a month. "You need to return immediately, or we're prepared to litigate." I lean back in my chair and look out at the Hudson River, where a private jet is ascending toward Teterboro Airport, probably carrying some private equity executive to his next acquisition meeting. The irony isn't lost on me. While I'm watching symbols of wealth and power navigate the morning sky, my former CEO is threatening litigation because his company is hemorrhaging money faster than a tech startup burning through series of funding. "Specific performance," I repeat, savoring the words like a fine wine. "That's an interesting legal theory, Richard. Tell me, did Harper actually read Section 14C before you authorized this phone call, or are you just hoping I forgot everything I learned in law school?" More silence. Paper rustling. The unmistakable sound of someone frantically flipping through contract pages while trying to maintain the illusion of legal authority. Because here's the thing about specific performance claims, I continue, enjoying every second of this corporate theater performance. They work really well when you haven't already terminated the employee without cause. But once you fire someone without cause, which, according to my termination letter, is exactly what happened, the legal landscape changes rather dramatically. I can hear muffled voices in the background, probably Harper Quinn explaining contract law to a CEO who's starting to realize that his legal education from watching corporate litigation movies might not be sufficient for this particular situation. "Let me help you with the legal analysis," I say, pulling out my copy of the employment agreement and flipping to the relevant section with theatrical precision. Section 14C, subsection 2, paragraph 4. Would you like me to read it to you, or would you prefer to have Harper explain why specific performance claims don't work when you've already voided the underlying employment relationship? What do you want? The question comes out like a surrender, which is exactly what it is. Richard Aldridge didn't become CEO by being stupid. He knows when he's lost, and he knows when it's time to start negotiating from a position of weakness. "I want you to book a conference room," I say, checking my Rolex Submariner, another brilliant investment from my bull market days. A nice one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that reminds everyone what success looks like. Bring your CFO, your general counsel, and the real numbers. Not the bullshit projections you show investors. Not the optimistic scenarios you present to the board. The actual fucking numbers that show exactly how much revenue you've lost and exactly how much more you're going to lose. When? Today. 2 p.m. conference room A. The one you use for hostile takeover defense meetings and SEC interviews. And Richard? Bring every single contract amendment, every client termination notice, and every piece of documentation showing Atlas protocol usage after my termination date. I can hear him swallowing, which is the sound of a man realizing that his legal problems are about to get significantly more expensive and significantly more public. Also, I continue, because why not twist the knife a little deeper? You might want to call your insurance carrier and check your directors' and officers' policy limits. Because once Harper explains the full scope of your intellectual property violations and Section 14C exposure, you're going to want to know exactly how much coverage you have for executive decision-making that rises to the level of gross negligence. The line goes quiet except for the background noise of what sounds like an emergency meeting in progress. Multiple voices, rapid conversation, the unmistakable sound of corporate panic being managed in real time by people who bill 4 figures per hour to clean up executive mistakes. This doesn't have to be adversarial. Richard says, his voice shifting from command to negotiation faster than a startup pivoting after a failed product launch. We can work something out. Find a solution that works for everyone. You're absolutely right. I agree. This doesn't have to be adversarial. It just has to be profitable. For me, I let that sink in for a moment. Like a private equity firm explaining acquisition terms to a founder who's about to learn the difference between ownership and control. See, Richard, the beautiful thing about well-drafted contracts is that they create predictable outcomes. Section 14(c) creates predictable liquidated damages. The Atlas Protocol licensing agreement creates predictable intellectual property infringement claims. Your decision to terminate me without cause and then continue using my IP creates predictable statutory damages under federal copyright law. How much? The question comes out barely above a whisper, like someone asking about terminal diagnosis prognosis. Bring the real numbers to the meeting, I say. All of them. Client termination notices, revenue impact projections, Atlas usage logs, the works. Once I see exactly how deep the hole is, I'll tell you exactly how much it's going to cost to climb out. And if we don't agree to meet? I smile, looking out at Manhattan's skyline where countless other corporate dramas are playing out in glass towers and corner offices across the city. Then you get to explain to your board, your shareholders, and eventually a federal judge why you thought threatening litigation was a better strategy than reading your own contracts. The silence stretches for nearly 30 seconds, an eternity in CEO time, when every moment costs money and every decision has consequences that ripple through quarterly earnings and stock valuations. Conference room A, he finally says. 2 p.m. Perfect. Oh, and Richard, you might want to update your LinkedIn profile before the meeting, just in case. I hang up and pour myself another cup of coffee, because nothing pairs with corporate capitulation quite like Blue Mountain Jamaican and the satisfied knowledge that contract law, when properly executed, is the most beautiful form of justice in the business world. For hours until showtime. Conference room A at 2 p.m. feels like walking into a war crimes tribunal where everyone's guilty, but nobody wants to admit it. The room screams corporate power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, a mahogany conference table that probably cost more than most people's annual salary, and the kind of Italian leather chairs that make hostile takeover negotiations feel more civilized. I arrive 5 minutes early because punctuality is power, wearing my Navy Tom Ford suit that fits like it was tailored by angels who understand the psychological impact of looking like you belong in boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions get made. Open collar, no tie, the universal signal for, I'm here by choice, not desperation. The assembled cast looks like a corporate disaster movie ensemble. Richard Aldridge sits at the head of the table looking like he hasn't slept since the Mesozoic era, his usually pristine appearance slightly frayed around the edges. Priya Malhotra, the CFO, has her laptop open with what appears to be 17 different spreadsheets running simultaneously, each one probably showing a different flavor of financial catastrophe. Harper Quinn, general counsel, sits behind a fortress of legal binders that would make a law library jealous. She's got the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's spent the last 72 hours reviewing contracts and calculating exactly how fucked her company really is. Greta Lynn from HR clutches a stack of forms like they're life preservers on a sinking ship. And then there's Raina, my wife, my former wife, my corporate nemesis. She's positioned herself at an angle that suggests this is a photo opportunity for her eventual LinkedIn post about navigating challenging transitions. But her knuckles are white where they grip her Mont Blanc pen, and there's something in her eyes that suggests she's finally beginning to understand the difference between authority and competence. I take my seat across from this assembled tribunal of corporate incompetence and place 3 copies of my employment contract on the table, each one tabbed with the precision of a litigation team preparing for federal court. The tabs are color-coded, blue for termination clauses, red for non-compete provisions, yellow for intellectual property rights. It's like a legal rainbow predicting the storm about to hit their quarterly projections. Gentlemen, ladies, I say with the casual confidence of someone who holds all the cards and knows exactly how to play them. Let's all turn to Section 14(c), shall we? Harper reaches for her copy first, because she's smart enough to know that in corporate disasters, The lawyer who reads fastest usually survives longest. Her lips move slightly as she reads, a habit probably developed during her Yale law days when she was optimistic enough to think corporate law would be about justice rather than damage control. Then she stops. Just stops. Like someone finding a typo in their own obituary. Oh, she says, and it's the kind of oh that contains entire universes of legal horror and career-ending realization. Priya looks up from her laptop where 17 different financial models are probably showing 17 different ways they're completely screwed. What does it say? Harper's voice carries the clinical precision of a pathologist delivering bad news to a terminal patient. It voids the non-compete for employee-originated relationships if termination is without cause. That's the first part, I say helpfully. Keep reading. Harper continues, her voice dropping to the hushed tone lawyers use when discussing malpractice insurance and barred disciplinary proceedings. Any attempt to compel performance after such termination triggers liquidated damages calculated as a multiple of trailing 12-month revenue from affected relationships. The temperature in the room drops approximately 15 degrees. Priya's fingers freeze over her keyboard like she's suddenly afraid to calculate what those numbers actually mean. Richard stares at the contract pages like they're written in ancient Sumerian and contain prophecies of corporate doom. Priya, I say conversationally, would you mind sharing your current run rate calculations? Specifically the revenue impact from our recent client departures. Priya's laptop screen reflects off the conference table glass as she pulls up a spreadsheet that looks like a financial autopsy report. 180 million, she says quietly. Annual recurring revenue. Gone. And the liquidated damages multiple for attempting to compel performance after without cause termination? Harper flips through contract pages with the frantic energy of someone looking for a loophole in their own death warrant. 3 times trailing revenue for willful breach of post-termination provisions. I let the math hang in the air like incense at a funeral. 3 times $180 million. $540 million in potential liquidated damages, not counting legal fees, interest, or the kind of punitive damages that federal judges award when they want to send messages about corporate behavior. Raina's face has gone pale, which is quite an achievement considering she usually maintains the kind of artificially perfect complexion that suggests regular visits to Upper East Side dermatologists who charge more per session than most people's car payments. Oh my God, she whispers, and it's the first genuine emotion I've seen from her since she told me my opinions were useless. It's the sound of someone realizing that her brilliant corporate power play has turned into the business equivalent of stepping on a landmine while juggling napalm. Richard's eyes do that thing where they go completely unfocused, like a private equity executive calculating IRR during a market crash. He's probably running mental scenarios involving emergency board meetings, shareholder lawsuits, and the kind of SEC filings that make business journalists start using words like crisis and investigation. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, Greta says unnecessarily, clutching her HR forms like they might spontaneously combust. 20 minutes. 20 minutes for them to figure out how to explain to their board of directors that they've managed to create legal exposure equivalent to a small country's GDP because they thought firing the guy who wrote their playbook was a good strategic decision. Harper looks like she's aged 5 years in the last 5 minutes, which is what happens when general counsels realize they're going to have to explain catastrophic legal exposure to directors who think contract law is something that happens to other people. Between Section 14C and the intellectual property violations, she says carefully, like someone defusing a bomb while explaining quantum physics. Our exposure is substantial. Substantial. That's lawyer speak for, we're so fucked that our malpractice insurance is probably going to laugh at us. I tap my fingers on the mahogany table, a gentle reminder that time is money, and their time is running out faster than a startup's runway during a funding winter. Now, I say with the measured calm of someone about to explain exactly how expensive their mistakes are going to be. Let's talk about intellectual property infringement and statutory damages under federal copyright law. The silence that follows is the sound of corporate careers ending in real time. Shall we discuss Atlas Protocol usage logs, or would you prefer to hear about the class action potential first? Raina's Mont Blanc pen slips from her fingers and hits the table with a sound like a gavel falling on a guilty verdict. 18 minutes until the board meeting. This is about to get very interesting. I slide another folder across the mahogany table with the casual precision of a poker player revealing a royal flush. This folder is thicker than the employment contract, bound in Italian leather that probably cost more than Greta's monthly salary, and contains 10 years of Atlas Protocol licensing agreements that are about to turn this corporate crisis into a federal court bonanza. The Atlas Protocol, I say, watching their faces like a venture capital partner evaluating a startup pitch from founders who've already spent their seed funding on Tesla Model S payments and craft beer. Let's discuss intellectual property law, shall we? Harper reaches for the folder with the reluctant enthusiasm of someone opening their own autopsy report. She's smart enough to know that in corporate disasters, the second shoe dropping is usually heavier than the first, and based on her expression, she's calculating exactly how much heavier this particular shoe is going to be. The license agreement terminated automatically the day you fired me. I continue, savoring each word like a 30-year-old single malt. Not next month when it's convenient for your quarterly earnings call. Not after a reasonable transition period that protects your client relationships. The day you handed me that termination letter signed by HR and blessed by compliance. Priya looks up from her laptop, where she's been running financial models that probably look like horror movie screenplays written in Excel formulas. What exactly constitutes the Atlas Protocol? She asks, which is the kind of question CFOs ask when they're trying to calculate exactly how fucked their company really is. I'm so glad you asked, I say, opening the folder to reveal documentation that would make a patent attorney weep with joy. Every client onboarding script that converts prospects at a 73% rate. Every renewal cadence template that's reduced your churn by 41% over the past 3 years. Every dashboard configuration that predicts client satisfaction with algorithmic precision that would make your AI marketing team orgasm with envy. I spread the documents across the table like evidence exhibits in a federal copyright infringement case. Each page representing thousands of hours of development, testing, and refinement that transformed generic legal services into a scalable, systematized approach to client success. Also included, I continue, escalation procedures that have prevented more contract terminations than a hostage negotiator, communication templates that have generated over $60 million in upsell revenue, and the entire methodology that your business development team has been selling as proprietary legal tech innovation to clients who pay premium rates for access to cutting-edge solutions. Richard's face has achieved a shade of pale that would make vampire makeup artists envious. He's finally understanding that the Atlas Protocol isn't just some internal process documentation. It's the entire foundation of their client service delivery model, licensed to them like software as a service, and now completely unavailable for legal use. Every Atlas template you've used since my termination, I say with the measured calm of someone explaining contract law to first-year students. Every dashboard pulling my methodology, every client interaction following my documented processes. That's willful infringement of copyrighted intellectual property with statutory damages that start at $750 per work and can escalate to $150,000 for willful violation. Harper's hands shake slightly as she flips through licensing agreements that probably seemed like routine paperwork when they were originally executed, but now read like confessions in a federal criminal case. Elliot, I continue, pulling out my phone with theatrical timing, has been very helpful in documenting system usage logs. Tell me, Harper, how familiar are you with digital forensics and intellectual property litigation? The question hangs in the air like smoke from a financial dumpster fire. Harper knows that digital forensics and IP cases can track every email sent, every template used, every system access that constitutes evidence of willful infringement. Priya, would you mind checking your system logs for Atlas Protocol usage since my termination date? I ask conversationally, like someone asking about lunch preferences rather than evidence of federal copyright violations. Priya's fingers move across her keyboard with the reluctant precision of someone inputting their own execution date. The laptop screen reflects numbers that would make securities attorneys immediately start drafting class action complaints. 17 accounts, she says quietly, her voice carrying the tone of someone delivering terminal diagnosis results. Atlas email templates, renewal cadences, and dashboard configurations. Total combined annual recurring revenue of approximately $140 million. $140 million in revenue generated through unauthorized use of my intellectual property. In federal copyright terms, that's not just infringement. That's willful infringement on a scale that makes federal judges start calculating punitive damages and considering whether to refer cases for criminal prosecution. Harper, I say, leaning back in my Italian leather chair like a private equity partner explaining acquisition terms to founders who are about to learn the difference between control and ownership. Would you mind doing the multiplication that neither of you wants to say out loud? Harper pulls out a calculator, probably the same one she used in law school when she was naive enough to think corporate practice would involve more justice and fewer damage control scenarios. Her fingers move with mathematical precision across numbers that represent career-ending legal exposure. Minimum statutory damages, she says carefully, $750 per work, times the number of copyrighted elements used. That's. She pauses, probably hoping the numbers will somehow change if she calculates slowly enough. Go ahead, I encourage. Show your work. Minimum exposure of approximately $10 million, she continues, her voice barely above a whisper. Maximum exposure for willful infringement could reach. Another pause, longer this time, like someone buying time before announcing the end of the world. Say it, Richard demands, his CEO voice cracking slightly around the edges. $150 million in statutory damages, Harper finishes. Plus attorneys' fees, costs, and potential treble damages for willful infringement in a commercial context. The silence that follows is the sound of corporate valuations collapsing in real time. I can practically hear shareholder equity evaporating, credit ratings being downgraded, and acquisition interest shifting from strategic partnership to distressed asset purchase. Between Section 14(c), liquidated damages, and intellectual property statutory damages, Harper continues with the clinical precision of someone calculating the trajectory of a financial meteor heading directly for their quarterly projections. Our combined exposure is. She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. When you're looking at potential damages that exceed $500 million, the exact number becomes less important than figuring out whether your directors' and officers' insurance covers executive decisions that rise to the level of gross negligence. Now, I say, checking my Rolex Submariner like someone timing the detonation of corporate explosive devices, let's discuss reputational damages, shareholder derivative claims, and the potential for class action litigation when this becomes public knowledge. Raina's knuckles have gone completely white where they grip the edge of the conference table, like someone holding onto the railing of a sinking ship while calculating the distance to the nearest lifeboat. You mentioned a board meeting. I continue conversationally. How do you suppose they're going to react when you explain that your strategic restructuring initiative has created legal exposure equivalent to a small country's GDP? Richard looks out the floor-to-ceiling windows toward Manhattan's financial district, where other corporate dramas are playing out in glass towers filled with executives who probably read their contracts before making decisions that affect hundreds of millions in revenue. What do you want? He asks again, but this time it's not a negotiation. It's complete capitulation. 14 minutes until the board meeting. Time to discuss terms. I reach into my briefcase. Italian leather that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments, and extract 2 documents that represent the difference between corporate survival and complete annihilation. The papers are bound in cream-colored folders that whisper expensive legal counsel and the kind of preparation that wins federal court cases. You have 2 options, I say, placing the documents on the mahogany table with the ceremonial precision of someone presenting terms of surrender after a particularly brutal corporate war. I like to think of them as Path A, quiet fix, and Path B, public war. Choose wisely, because this decision is going to determine whether your company exists in 6 months or becomes a cautionary tale in business school case studies. Richard leans forward like a private equity executive examining acquisition terms for a distressed asset, which is basically what his company has become in the span of 1 week. Harper reaches for the first folder with the reluctant enthusiasm of someone opening their own malpractice insurance claim. Option A. I begin, savoring each word like aged whiskey. represents what we might call the adult supervision approach to corporate crisis management. I opened the first folder to reveal terms that would make a management consultant orgasm with their systematic precision and profit optimization. I return as an external consultant, not an employee. I'm done with that particular social experiment. Consultant. $950 per hour, 200 hours prepaid. That's $190,000 in my account before I answer a single client phone call. Priya's fingers move across her calculator with the mechanical precision of someone calculating the cost of corporate salvation. 190,000, she repeats, probably comparing it to the $500 million alternative and realizing it's the bargain of the century. Atlas Protocol license reinstated. I continue. At 3 times the previous annual fee. That's $450,000 per year for the privilege of using intellectual property that actually works, as opposed to the artificial intelligence bullshit your marketing team keeps promising clients. Harper scribbles notes with the frantic energy of someone documenting terms that might save her legal career. The previous Atlas license was $150,000 annually, a fraction of the revenue it generated, which is exactly how intellectual property licensing works when you're smart enough to retain ownership rights. Formal apology acknowledging the contractual breach and client harm. I say, watching Raina's face contort like someone biting into a lemon dipped in corporate humiliation. This goes out to all affected clients, signed by Richard, explaining that the company made strategic errors in relationship management and has taken corrective action to ensure service continuity. The apology isn't just about ego, it's about legal liability. In client service litigation, formal acknowledgement of breach often prevents class action escalation and demonstrates good faith efforts to mitigate damages. Raina resigns as manager. I continue, and the temperature in the room drops another 10 degrees. Immediately. She can stay with the company in whatever capacity doesn't involve authority over people who understand how business actually works, but she's done making decisions that affect revenue. Raina's mouth opens like she's about to object, but Richard raises his hand with the decisive authority of someone who's finally figured out which employee is expendable. CEO survival instincts are beautiful things. They cut through bullshit faster than hostile takeover defenses. And finally, I say, I control all 10 client transitions. Direct communication, relationship restoration, damage control. No pod systems, no AI assistants, no corporate buzzword initiatives. Just competent account management by someone who actually knows what the fuck he's doing. I close the first folder and tap the second one with my Mont Blanc pen. The same pen I used to sign the original Atlas licensing agreement back when I was naive enough to think corporate loyalty was bidirectional. Option B, I say, represents what happens when companies choose litigation over capitulation. The second folder opens to reveal documentation that would make a securities attorney immediately start drafting class action complaints. I accept a senior partner position with Kingsley Advisory Partners. That's Whitmore Capital's boutique legal services affiliate, in case you're wondering where your best client disappeared to. Harper's face goes pale, which is quite an achievement considering she's already achieved vampire-level complexion from stress and sleep deprivation. Kingsley Advisory Partners isn't just a competitor. They're the kind of white shoe firm that specializes in poaching dissatisfied clients from companies stupid enough to prioritize corporate restructuring over relationship management. I take lawful custody of all Exhibit J relationships. I continue. Under the employee-originated relationship provisions that your termination without cause triggered. That's all 10 accounts, $180 million in annual recurring revenue, legally transferred to a competitor who actually understands client service. The mathematics of this scenario are beautiful in their simplicity. My former employer loses $180 million in revenue, while simultaneously facing liquidated damages for attempting to compel performance and statutory damages for intellectual property infringement. It's like watching someone commit financial suicide while filming themselves for a business school documentary about strategic incompetence. Section 14, C. Liquidated damages and IP statutory damages proceed to federal court. I say, enjoying the way Harper's hand trembles slightly as she takes notes. Wire transfer due Friday at 5 p.m., where your company becomes Exhibit A in a case study about why contract law matters. But here's where option B gets really interesting, because I've been busy during my unexpected career transition period. A venture capital fund has already soft-circled a $12 million Series A. I continue, watching Richard's eyes go wide with the horror of someone realizing his fired employee is about to become his well-funded competitor. Atlas Protocol spins out as a standalone legal tech startup, software as a service methodology, serving those 10 client logos directly. 12 million in series of funding to build a direct competitor using the intellectual property and client relationships they threw away. It's like watching someone donate their liver to create a more successful version of themselves. Kingsley holds an acquisition right after year 2. I add, because why not twist the knife a little deeper? Valuation based on revenue multiples that I'm quite confident will exceed your current market cap, considering the head start I'll have with established client relationships and proven technology. I lean back and check my Rolex again, because timing in corporate negotiations is everything, and their board meeting starts in 8 minutes. There's also, I mentioned casually, preliminary interest from a private equity fund in minority stake acquisition of Atlas pre-launch. Apparently, proven legal tech with established client relationships and documented revenue generation is exactly the kind of asset that gets institutional investors excited about portfolio diversification opportunities. The silence that follows is the sound of corporate executives calculating exactly how completely they've fucked themselves. Richard stares at the 2 folders like someone choosing between amputation and death by infection. You have 6 minutes to decide, I say, standing up and straightening my Tom Ford suit jacket. Choose option A, and your company survives with expensive lessons learned about contract reading and relationship management. Choose option B, and you get to explain to your board of directors how you created a well-funded competitor while simultaneously destroying your own business model. Richard looks out the window where a private jet curves toward Teterboro Airport, probably carrying some private equity executive to his next acquisition meeting. The irony isn't lost on anyone in the room. While we're discussing corporate survival scenarios, symbols of actual success are literally flying past the windows. Option A saves your company, I say, walking toward the door. Option B creates mine. I pause at the threshold, hand on the Italian brass door handle. Board meeting starts in 4 minutes. I'll be in the lobby bar if you need me. Time to let market forces and mathematical reality do their beautiful, inevitable work. Greta Lynn clears her throat with the delicate precision of someone about to step into a minefield wearing ballet slippers. She's clutching her HR forms like they're life preservers on the Titanic, which is basically what this conference room has become, a floating disaster where everyone's trying to figure out who gets the lifeboats and who goes down with the ship. Do you want to discuss the interpersonal dimension? She asks, her voice carrying the forced optimism of someone who's been trained to believe that every corporate crisis can be solved with proper documentation and employee wellness seminars. I look at her with the kind of bemused expression usually reserved for people who suggest solving federal budget deficits with bake sales. The interpersonal dimension? Your marriage, she clarifies, glancing between Raina and me like a couples therapist who's just realized both patients are sociopaths. The workplace relationship implications. We have policies about. No, I interrupt, because there are some conversations that don't need to happen in corporate conference rooms under fluorescent lighting while CFOs calculate bankruptcy scenarios. We don't need to discuss the interpersonal dimension. The truth is, my marriage died somewhere between Raina's promotion and her discovery that authority is a drug more addictive than cocaine, but with significantly more devastating withdrawal symptoms. It probably died officially at our last law school reunion, where she spent the evening collecting applause from classmates who remembered her as someone with potential, while I spent the night explaining compliance requirements to partners who actually understood that legal work involves more than looking good in Tom Ford jackets. Raina loved the applause. I loved compliance that actually complied with something other than corporate ego and quarterly PowerPoint presentations. I think we're done here, I say, standing up and collecting my folders with the measured calm of someone who's just successfully detonated a corporate nuclear device. You have terms. You have options. You have exactly. I check my Rolex. 93 minutes to make a decision before your board realizes that their strategic restructuring initiative has created more legal exposure than most small countries face during regime changes. I walk out of conference room A without looking back, because in corporate negotiations, confidence is everything. And confidence means never looking like you need their decision more than they need your solution. The elevator ride down 47 floors gives me exactly enough time to process what just happened. In the span of 1 week, I've gone from terminated employee to corporate destroyer to potential savior, all because someone forgot that contract law doesn't care about office politics or who you're sleeping with. I drive my Tesla Model South back along Riverside Drive, the autopilot handling traffic, while I handle the psychological recalibration that comes with completely obliterating your former employer's business model. The car's navigation system suggests 3 different routes to my Upper West Side penthouse, probably unaware that I just created 3 different routes for my former company to either survive or implode. The penthouse feels different now, less like a symbol of corporate success, more like a command center for whatever comes next. I pour myself 3 fingers of Macallan 25, the kind of scotch that costs more per ounce than most people's hourly wages, and settle into my leather chair to watch the sun bounce off Midtown glass, like hostile takeover rumors reflecting through Manhattan's financial district. My phone buzzes with text messages that read like real-time corporate intelligence from a very expensive spy network. Elliot, of course, because that man has access to more internal information than the SEC during a securities fraud investigation. Emergency board session extended. His first message reads, Richard disappeared into executive washroom for 17 minutes. Harper's been on phone with 3 different outside counsel firms. Pri is running what appears to be bankruptcy scenarios. Bankruptcy scenarios. When CFOs start modeling bankruptcy, it means they're trying to figure out whether Chapter 11 restructuring offers better shareholder protection than whatever legal clusterfuck they're currently facing. It's like watching someone choose between amputation and death by gangrene. Another text. Board members arriving via private jet. Counted 4 different corporate aircraft at Teterboro in the last 2 hours. These aren't scheduled meetings. This is crisis management. For private jets. When board members start burning jet fuel for emergency meetings, it means someone's about to get fired, someone's about to get promoted, or someone's about to discover that their company's valuation just became a creative writing exercise. Raina's name appeared on a resignation memo draft. Elliot continues. Saw it on Harper's screen before she minimized the window. 1 line, no adjectives, effective immediately. Perfect. Sometimes corporate survival requires sacrificing the people who created the problems, especially when those people thought authority was more important than competence. Raina's about to learn that in corporate Darwinism, being married to the guy you fired doesn't offer evolutionary advantages. My phone rings with an unknown number, which in post-corporate crisis terms usually means either a headhunter, a journalist, or someone who wants to offer me money for things I haven't done yet. I let it go to voicemail, because desperation has a sound, and I want to hear exactly how desperate whoever's calling really is. The voicemail is from someone who identifies himself as a managing partner at a private equity firm that specializes in legal tech acquisitions. He's heard through industry channels about my innovative approach to client relationship management and would like to explore potential collaboration opportunities for independent venture development. Translation. Someone leaked the Atlas Protocol opportunity, and private equity vultures are circling with term sheets and acquisition interests before I've even decided whether to compete with my former employer or destroy them completely. Another text from Elliot. They're drafting Option A acceptance. Saw Harper's screen. Your consultant retainer agreement is being prepared for signature. Wire transfer authorization is pending Richard's approval. Option A. The smart choice. The survival choice. The choice that allows them to continue existing while paying premium rates for the privilege of using intellectual property they threw away and relationship management they nearly destroyed. I walk out onto my terrace, where Manhattan spreads below like a circuit board of corporate ambition and financial opportunity. The city noise sounds like a closing bell, the end of one trading session, the beginning of whatever comes next. My phone buzzes again. Another private equity inquiry. This one from a fund that manages $4.7 billion in assets and wants to discuss minority stake opportunities in proven legal tech platforms with established client relationships. For $0.7 billion in assets under management. When funds that size start making acquisition inquiries, it means someone's done the math and realized that proven revenue streams are worth more than startup lottery tickets and unicorn fantasies. I send one final text to Elliot. Atlas goes independent in 6 months regardless of their decision. Start making a list of law firm alumni who understand the difference between artificial intelligence and actual intelligence. His response comes back immediately, a rocket ship emoji followed by, already started. Turns out a lot of people are tired of working for companies that think algorithms can replace expertise. I finish my Macallan and watch the sun set over a city where corporate fortunes rise and fall based on decisions made in conference rooms by people who sometimes forget to read their own contracts. Tomorrow, I'll either be the expensive consultant who saved a company from its own stupidity or the well-funded competitor who's about to eat their lunch with better technology and stolen clients. Either way, I'm about to be significantly richer than I was when this week started. And Raina's about to learn that calling someone's opinions useless works a lot better when you're not depending on that someone to save your fucking company. Next afternoon, 2:07 p.m., and I'm watching Manhattan's financial district through my penthouse windows when my phone lights up with the kind of urgent corporate communications that usually accompany SEC filings or hostile takeover announcements. Except this time, I'm not the target. I'm the solution to someone else's very expensive problem. The first domino falls in the form of coordinated social media updates that read like a perfectly orchestrated PR campaign designed to explain away catastrophic client departures without actually admitting corporate incompetence. Whitmore Capital posts a LinkedIn update thanking their previous legal services provider for professional transition assistance while announcing their strategic partnership expansion with Kingsley Advisory Partners. Kestrel Logistics follows with a similar post about optimizing vendor relationships for enhanced service delivery. Novartis Biotech, fresh off their Series B funding and probably advised by communications consultants who charge more per hour than Supreme Court justices, announces their commitment to best-in-class legal counsel through established industry relationships. It's corporate speak for, we fired our previous firm because they replaced competence with artificial intelligence and thought pod systems were an acceptable substitute for relationship management. But translated through PR filters, it sounds like strategic business optimization rather than emergency damage control. The market reacts immediately because institutional investors understand the difference between planned transitions and client exodus scenarios. By 2:04 p.m., trading algorithms have detected unusual activity in legal services sector stocks, and by 2:06 p.m., someone started asking questions about revenue concentration and client retention rates that probably make quarterly earnings calls significantly more interesting. At exactly 2:07 p.m., Harper Quinn calls with the breathless urgency of someone who's spent the last 18 hours explaining federal court exposure scenarios to board members who thought contract law was something that happened to other people. We accept option A as tendered, she says without preamble, her voice carrying the tone of complete capitulation mixed with profound relief. Full terms, no modifications, executed as written. Option A, the survival option. The choice that allows them to continue existing while paying premium rates for the privilege of competent relationship management and access to intellectual property that actually generates revenue instead of quarterly PowerPoint presentations about artificial intelligence synergies. At 2:09 p.m., my email inbox receives wire transfer instructions for the consultant retainer along with a draft apology letter signed by Richard Aldridge that reads like a confession written by someone who's finally figured out the difference between authority and competence. The letter acknowledges strategic errors in relationship management transition and corrective action to ensure service continuity through proven methodologies. It's corporate speak for, we fucked up catastrophically by firing the guy who wrote our playbook, and we're very sorry for being so monumentally stupid about basic business operations. At 2:11 p.m., Raina's resignation hits my inbox like a perfectly timed acquisition announcement. One line, no adjectives, effective immediately, Raina Mercer hereby resigns from all management positions effective today. No explanation, no gratitude for opportunities, no corporate buzzwords about pursuing new challenges. Just acknowledgement that her brief experiment with authority over people who actually understand business has concluded with the efficiency of a hostile takeover defense. Sometimes corporate Darwinism works exactly as designed. I finish reading the resignation email and immediately forward it to my divorce attorney. Because when your spouse's corporate power play results in their immediate termination and your financial leverage increasing by several $1,000,000, it's probably time to discuss asset division and alimony calculations with someone who specializes in high-net-worth marital dissolution. By 3:15 p.m., I'm walking into a glass corner office that technically isn't mine, but which everyone understands I now control more completely than if I owned the deed. It's amazing how quickly corporate hierarchies adapt when survival depends on acknowledging who actually has the power to solve problems versus who just thought they did. The office smells like expensive leather and existential dread, which is apparently the standard atmosphere for corporate crisis management. My first order of business is triage, the kind of systematic damage control I use to perform in actual litigation war rooms when cases involved more than hurt feelings and wounded egos. One client at a time, one contract clause at a time, one conversation at a time. Whitmore Capital agrees to a transition call for Thursday morning, contingent on my personal involvement in relationship restoration and service continuity planning. Kestrel Logistics schedules a comprehensive review meeting for Friday, focused on regulatory compliance requirements and the kind of detailed attention that algorithms can't provide. Novartis Biotech wants a complete service audit because biotech companies with Series B funding don't take chances with legal counsel that might jeopardize their regulatory approval timelines. Each conversation is a masterclass in the difference between artificial intelligence and actual intelligence, between pod systems and personal relationships, between corporate restructuring theories and business reality. These clients didn't leave because they wanted different legal services. They left because they wanted the same legal services from someone who actually knew what the fuck he was doing. By 6:30 p.m., I've scheduled relationship restoration calls with 7 of the 10 departed clients. Negotiated service resumption terms that include premium rates for immediate availability and established escalation procedures that bypass every layer of corporate bureaucracy that created this disaster in the first place. The remaining 3 clients, Helios Minerals, Arclight Media, and Sterling Foods, require more complex negotiations involving their new service providers and the kind of diplomatic relationship management that you can't systematize into a SaaS platform. That night, I stand on my penthouse terrace watching city lights spread across Manhattan like a circuit board of corporate ambition and financial opportunity. The noise from 47 floors below sounds like a closing bell, the end of one trading session, the beginning of whatever comes next. I pull out my phone and send one final text to Elliot. Atlas goes independent in 6 months. Let's hire from our law firm alumni list. His response comes back immediately. A rocket ship emoji followed by, already started recruiting. Amazing how many people want to work for a company that values competence over corporate politics. 6 months. Enough time to stabilize the current client relationships, systematize the Atlas methodology for independent deployment, and build the kind of legal tech startup that actually understands the difference between innovation and buzzword marketing. I've already fielded 3 more calls from private equity firms interested in minority stake investments, 2 venture capital inquiries about series of funding for proven legal tech platforms, and 1 acquisition offer from a multinational professional services firm that recognizes intellectual property value when they see documentation and revenue streams that actually work. The Atlas protocol is about to become Atlas Legal Technologies, with a valuation based on proven client relationships, documented revenue generation, and the kind of sustainable competitive advantages that come from understanding what clients actually need versus what corporate marketing departments think sounds impressive in quarterly presentations. Standing here tonight, watching Manhattan's financial district pulse with the rhythm of capital markets and corporate ambition, I can't help but smile at the beautiful symmetry of it all. 1 week ago, Raina told me my opinions were useless while handing me a termination letter that she thought represented her corporate victory. Tonight, she's unemployed, And I'm about to become the founder of a legal tech startup with institutional backing, proven technology, and a client base that's already pre-validated the market opportunity. 10 accounts and 180 million in annual recurring revenue later. Everyone in that conference room learned a fundamental lesson about corporate dynamics. When companies choose artificial intelligence over actual intelligence, when they prioritize restructuring theories over relationship reality, when they decide that algorithms can replace expertise and competence can be systematized into pod methodologies, they discover very quickly who, exactly, was replaceable. Turns out it wasn't me. Game over, sweetheart.